This is David Lichtenstein, and welcome to the Yeshivas Shalmaila. This week we're going to be having part 2 of extremism. Where does it come from? Why is there so much of it? Is it good or bad for Klal Yisrael? We will have a very esteemed roster of guests. We will have from New York, Rabbi Yosef, Gavriel Bechoffer, a Rav, a Machanech, a Dayan, Machabes Farim. We will have from Munich, Germany, the Rav of Munich, Germany, Rabbi Yehuda Horovitz, a big miyuchas. He's also from Yerushalayim. From Philadelphia, we will have Dr. Paul Offit, one of the great experts on vaccinations. We will quiz him and try to give him a rough time and we'll play some anti-vaxxer questions to him. From Lakewood, New Jersey, we'll have Rabbi Yitzchok Feldheim. He is a great mashpia, Aish Hatorah's national lecturer. He will give us maybe a contrarian view of why extremism has its milas. We will have Reb Shmuel Yaakov Klein from Borough Park and Umesorah from Ger. He will also give us his dais on this. Before we go to our program, we got many responses, probably well over 100 responses to last week's program. Here is one responder.
Hi, I don't want to comment specifically on the nonsense of this past week about extremism, but the things you said, because it might sound like everything else was okay or other weeks were okay, almost every word on the show is negative Torah. I just want to comment on one thing. The Yiddishkeit is Gebot of extremism. Gebot of Kitonius. The Mechanech all our kids for Kitonius and only Kitonius. And extremism is a spitz MS. And even somebody's not holding by extremism, it's supposed to be Maggid, that's the MS. Somebody that hates extremism, there's no room for him. Such a person that hates extremism. Never. Rather, there's partial extremism, essence of extremism, the right thing. Extremism just means extreme MS. You have to go extreme. And rather, if you go up to Torah, you have to be extreme all the way. My point is, in the Derech HaTorah, 100% you have to be extreme.
Okay, so let me respond to this a little bit. He's saying extremism is good, and that is the Derech HaTorah. So I would ask just a few questions. Let's go to the famous Rambam in Hilchos Deis. Right away in the beginning of Hilchos Deis, Rambam writes, Haderech HaYeshara Hi Mida Beinanis. The proper path is the middle path. Shebekol Deya V'Deya. He calls this the Derech HaMamutza. Sheyeshta V'hi Adashi Rechoika Mishtei Haktzavais. Not on either extreme, Richuk Shava, but right in the middle. Ve'ena Kraiva, Loilazu V'Loilazu. Not near either extreme. Lefichach Tzivu Chachamim Harishainim Shea Adam Sam De'oisav Tamid Umeshayroisam Umechavanoisam Bederech HaEmtzais. The Rambam writes, the famous Rambam, go the middle route. It's also in Shmoyne Prakim, where he calls it Valachta Bedrachav. He says, what's Valachta Bedrachav? Take the middle route. So this is the Rambam. And it's not just the Rambam. I mean, on the Pasuk in Mishlei, I'll take you minu Shmuel, the Baal HaKedah says, Sheyishmer mehayimin v'hasmuel b'kavanoisav. He says, don't go to any kitzvah, right? Sheyichavin ela emtza. Or on the Mishnah, Ezi derech yeshara sheyever loy adam in Avis Perik Beis, Kol shi tiferes loiseh v'tiferes loy mina adam. If something is not tiferes loy mina adam, there's something wrong with it. And what does the Rambam in the Pirush HaMishnayos define? What is tiferes loy mina adam? The Rambam that says it's the derech ha'emtzayu Rambam says that I described in Perik Revi of the Shmoyne Prakim, the middle route. And I ask this caller, when you see these extremes, people lying down and screaming Auschwitz Falala Tzava, or marching in front of the UN, give back Palestine, lying down in streets, etc., is that Tiferes Min Adam? Does anybody walk by there and say, wow, look at the Jews, or look at the Fruma Yidin, or look at this it's such a beautiful thing? I mean, the Mishnah gives really a clear thing, Tiferes Min Adam. It says, V'chol karban min chascha b'melech timlech. All karbanis b'melech timlech, al kol karbancha takriv melech. Every mincha, every carbon has to be salted. And the question is why? What's the significance of salting a carbon? I heard years ago, I don't remember, from one of the Kadmainim, that Salt, you over-salt the food, it's inedible. Right? It becomes salty and you can't eat it. And the best of foods, over-salted, your best steak, whatever, your favorite dishes, kugel, whatever, over-salted, inedible. You spit it out. Under-salted, it's tasteless. Without salt, food has no taste whatsoever. So then what does salt represent? Salt represents balance, deliberateness, shekel, right? Why does every carbon need salt? A lot of time we want to do something with Mesiris Nefesh. We want to send our kid to the best yeshiva. Well, you know what? Guess what? This kid has other milas. He doesn't have the Zitzfleisch to sit for the 15 hours a day, 13 hours at a good yeshiva, the best yeshiva would have. Or, we want to be mashadach with us. Or we ourselves, we make a certain Kabbalah. I'm going to do this so-and-so. I'm going to mamish, learn. Well, you know what? You have other milas. Or maybe you don't. Maybe it is for you. So, Mesiris Nefesh, that is without balance, is it going to create antagonism or create inspiration? Well, Rav Hutner used to say, don't make Yiddishkeit into like a Sedaim battle. In Sedaim, if you were tall, they shortened you. If you were short, they lengthened you. They made everybody the exact same. In life, there's this for this, this one for that. When we start to see the world in black and white, it becomes a very inhospitable place. Al kor kabancha takrav melach. Make sure, when we do something with Mesiris Nefesh, make sure that it's Tiferes Leiseh and Tiferes La'adam. Like, does a person looking at say, wow, that's something beautiful, that's with Shikal Adas, that's thought out, that's deliberate. Or do they look at it and they shake their heads? Al kol kabancha takrav melach. I could be on this, I could mention 50 sources. Avis Drib Nasen says there are shnei shvalim in the world, shvilim, two paths. One shel of fire, and the other one is a shelig, of ice. He says, not the letzadzeh, you go to one extreme, yamas, you fall into the fire. Letzadzeh, you fall into the ice, yamas. Rak yelech be'emtza. I mean, there's so many of these. Is there one or two outlying opinions that talk about extremism as yet? But certainly the great body of Halacha, Haskafa, is certainly not that way. So, whatever the case is, we'll hear many, many other opinions this week. Let me say a vert on the Parsha. What does it say in this coming week's Parsha? The Gemara in Brachas of Lamed Aleph Amid Bey says, on the pasuk V'niksa V'nizra Zera, if she's cleansed by the water, this refers to the Saita, she drinks the Mei Saita. And what happens if nothing happens? So we know she's Tahira, the Nizra Zera shall have children. So the Gemara says, if she was an Akara, if she didn't have children, she will have children. If she had damaged children, she'll have healthy children. If she had one, she'll have two. The Saita gets rewarded in the event that she's found to be clean, and there was nothing wrong with what she had done. She indeed had not had a relationship. So the question is like this. We can understand why they get back together again, because at the end of the day, Yichud does an asa. But why is she rewarded? I mean, certainly she shouldn't get schar for having, she ended up in a compromised situation. Why is she rewarded for it? So I want to suggest an explanation. We live in a generation where, whatever your community you're from, divorce is just flourishing. When I was a kid, it used to be, you would hear about it occasionally. Today, everybody everybody knows people are getting divorced, certainly among the younger people, but even among older. Why is that? Because the easiest thing to do, very often the easiest thing to do, is to walk away. Like, move on, start over. 50% in the secular world, 50 plus, will get divorced, and it's come to us too. It's very hard to work things out. Often it means we have to show vulnerability. And there's a famous nursery rhyme that certainly supports this position. All of us have heard of Humpty Dumpty. all the king's horses and all the king's men. The Melech Halein, he couldn't put Humpty Dumpty back together again. That's it. There was a fracture in the relationship. You move on, right? But think what this site has done. What did she do? She persevered in the relationship. Because you know why? Because here's a myth. Great relationships are not about two perfect people meeting, like in a Hollywood movie or like some story, right? What is it about? It's about two people persevering and making it work. Again, great relationships are not about ideal two people meeting, but it's about persevering to imperfect people making it work, right? Remember, it's often the last key in the batch that opens up the lock, right? So what did the site do? She said, I could have walked away. Imagine the embarrassment, right? Going to the chutzner of the Beis Hamikdash and being mashke in front of all the people, those crowds over there, and he was Nista Reisha, he took her, she was Para Reisha Isha, but she could have said, you know what, let's move on. Instead, what did she say? She said, no, I'm going to make this relationship work. And you know what? For that, she's rewarded. And where else do we see that? We see that with Leah. Leah is the scorned wife. Rachel is beautiful. Rachel haise yefas toyer v'fas mare. And Leah wasn't. So Leah is scorned. Does she give up and move on? She knows she's scorned. She calls her child Ra Hashem Ba'ani is the first one. Then we know exactly about her relationship with Yaakov. She named her children after her relationship with Yaakov. The second one is Shama Hashem Kisnua Nechi. I'm hated. But what does she do? Does she give up? No. The next child is Hapami Lava Ishelai. That strong desire. Let's make it work. And the next one, Hapam Oides Hashem. What happens by Yisachar? Sachar Scharticha, the flowers, Ruvain's flowers of love. She gets Yaakov because of that. Hapam Yiz Beleini Ishi, constant the striving. Let me make this relationship work. And what happens in the end? The scorned wife, is the one that's buried together with Yaakov. Leah persisted. She fixed the relationship. She was the anti-Humpty Dumpty. And in the Yud Gimel Midas, which are all about repairing relationships, the Yud Gimel Midas are given. After the Rabbi Nishvel and Klal Yisrael, the relationships gets fractured. So Rabbi Nishvel gives 13 ways how to repair a relationship. And one of them is Erech HaPayim. What does Erech HaPayim mean? Take the long look. What does the long look mean? Today there's hate. Today there's anger. Shama Hashem Kisnu Anaychi. Today. But one day, one day there will be love. Just because today the relationship is fractured doesn't mean it's going to stay fractured forever. So what's the reward of the Saita? The reward of the Saita is because she put Humpty Dumpty back together again. She realized that great relationships take great work. They're not ideal, and that's why V'niksa V'nizra Zera. Let's go to our riddle of the week. It says in the Parsha, it says, V'haisem nitma, v'timel mal b'isha, ubo ba hamayim ha'ma'arim lamarim, v'tzivsa bitna v'nafla yirecha. So the waters were baidik, whether there was an event that destroys the marriage or not. So the Gemara says, so here's the question. For her to be nivdak, she had to bring a carbon, right? She had to bring a minchas kinef. Without the mincha, the mayim would not be baidik. So here's the question. The Gemara in Zvachim on Daf Mem Zayin has a man the Yamar that not only could a carbon be nifsal al yidei pigel through the kohen, through the one who sacrifices it, but the Bailim could also have a machshavas pigel and to basically make the carbon puzzle, that the carbon is ineffectual. So a clever person will tell the Isha the following trick. Listen, you're going to the Beis Hamikdash, you want the minchas kinnis, you want the mayim not to be baidik. Here's the trick. When the carbon is makar of the mincha, have a machshava, that it should be not lishma, whatever some a machshavas pigel. The mincha will become puzzle. The mincha's puzzle. The mayim is not going to be baidik, and you're going to come out like a hero, shining like a hero. He has a legal loophole, right? You would go to a good lawyer, somebody who knows about tax loopholes, a good tie-in, and he has a fabulous loophole, like the man the yamar. That pigel could be not just al yidei the koyin, but al yidei the bailim, like the ishav and machshavas pigel on the mincha. Without the mincha, the mayim is not baidik, and that way get off the hook. That is riddle number one. Riddle number two. The Ramban says in Parsha of Saita, he says, Ein b'chol mishpetei haTorah dava tolui b'nes. The only nes happens, a nes that's a pella, is the nes how the mayim is baidik. Right? And the reason is, I guess, because Klal Yisrael, the yichus, the purity of the family, is the foundation of Klal Yisrael. The first mitzvah given to Klal Yisrael, is about the Yiddish family. Right? Celebase avos celebayis, all Parshas Harois is about keeping the family intact. The person basically who comes from a background of a family that, a solid family has a much easier time in life, it builds character, etc. So he says, for this, the Torah makes a nes. And the Lashon, ein b'chol mishpetei haTorah zulasi ha'inyan hazeh. Question is, here's a stira. The Ramban in Parshas Azriah, Yud Gimel Mem Zayin says, Nigei begadim, the nigei batim, Ramban says, are not derech hateva, but they're nisim me'eis hakadosh baruch hu. Right? Clothing doesn't grow a rash. So in one place, Ramban says, the only time we have in the Torah nes, in our Parshi says, is by Saita. In nigei batim, he also says it's a nes. That is our second riddle of the week. Let's go to our wonderful guests. We have with us on the phone Rabbi Yosef Gavriel Bechoffer, a Rebbe, a Maggid Shiur, a Rebbe in Pesach, a Mechaber of Sforim, contemporary Yerev, Big Day Sheish, and Baba Basra and others. He's a Talmud of the Mir, a Musmach of Rav Zalman Nechemya Goldberg. He's a Dayan in the Bezdin of America. Welcome, Rav Bechoffer.
Thank you.
So, Rabbi Bechoffer, what's the difference? A lot of people don't know. What's the difference between when is something a kula and when is something a chumrah?
So first we
define kula and define chumrah.
Okay, so if we have, there's the baseline halacha, obviously, which is what the majority of poskim holds in any specific subject, and what the puchazei maya madvar, the way people generally conduct themselves, tzibur nam Yisrael. That's baseline. Then when you have something like Shas Adchak, or Karban Shabbos, or Hefse Meruba, those are cases in which a kula is warranted, in which case we might go after a minority of poskim, as long as they're poskim of great stature, and be lenient. That would be called a kula. A chumrah is when we would conversely follow a minority of poskim and try to be more stringent than the baseline halacha.
So let me give you a few examples, and you explain kula, chumrah, etc. Okay, let's start with the simple. Somebody eats chalav stam in America because the Somayach and Ramesh's tshuva. Is that a kula or not?
I would say that's a baseline halacha.
Okay. What about somebody carries in an erev in an area that many won't carry? Let's say somebody carries in Flatbush with an erev. How would you describe that?
Well, it depends what tzibur they're a part of, but in this case we have to understand what role the Rav plays in a balabas's life. Usually a person who's a member of a shul is not to sign that on his own. So if the Rav of his shul tells him he can carry in the eruv, then that becomes the baseline halacha for him. If the Rav of his shul tells him he can't carry in the eruv, then that becomes the baseline halacha for him.
So wait, so let me back up now. Now, this Rav himself who carries in the eruv, is for him? Is it he can't rely on anybody? So is it a kula or a chumrah?
Well, he actually relies. For him. He has to make the judgment. He has to actually.
I'm asking you. So he knows Ramosha said you're not allowed to. I would say the majority of poskim say you're not allowed to. Right? To people who carry in Manhattan, Flatbush, etc. Would you say it's a kula or a chumrah for this fellow himself?
I don't want to take a position on that because they're clearly a poskim on both sides. It's not my. I am a scholar. I'm not being paskening this question. I can tell you because it's Ramesh against the Chazon Ish, and therefore I don't want to take a side in this. I can tell you, as somebody who wrote a sefer on Eruvin, separately, that most Eruvin in America are apostle. But so people should not rely on Eruvin unless a Rav should not assume his Eruvin is kosher until he checks it himself. But that is a whole other topic.
Now, you said something interesting. You said if his Rav would say it's okay, then he doesn't have to look any further. And I'm wondering, what are you basing that on?
Well, that's how it works in Am Yisrael. You go to your Rav. Everybody has a Rav. If the Rav is a Bar Samcha, so then that Rav is the one you ask your Shilas to. He is the one who's responsible for your halachic observance. I think that this is the Umesorah and Am Yisrael Midorei Doros.
So even though somebody knows, is aware of the tumult in the world, right, and he says, let's say would be Rav would say you can carry. I'm just using this as an example. I say it very safely because I don't live in these areas, so it's like, you know what I mean? It's no skin off my back. I say that tongue-in-cheek. But let's say you live in those areas, and you know Rav Paiskim holds you're not allowed to. So is somebody allowed to close their eyes and say, look, I'm just following my Rav?
You know, I was once told by a Choshva Rav that one should never be the Rav of a Kehillah B'nai Torah. Only Kehillah Pasha Balabatim. Because the B'nai Torah, yes, they know better. If they think they know better than the Rav, then they have to explore the issue themselves. They can't just relinquish their responsibility to a Rav on any topic. However, a Balabas, who's Tlimasdik, he can rely on whatever his Rav says. That's why he's a member of a congregation.
Okay. So define for us now a Chumrah.
Chumrah is, again, when you decide to follow the minority of poskim and take a higher standard.
So give us an example in America today. You live in America, of something that you would say, this is a kula and this is a Chumrah.
A Chumrah would be, let's say, I decide I'm not going to open bottle caps on Shabbos.
I'm not going to open. You mean the break bottle caps where they twist off, which Ramosha Aser. In other words, he says even though Ramosha Aser it, since I would say many paiskim are matter it, you would say that's a Chumrah.
Yes.
Interesting. And I'm curious, even though you wouldn't say Ramosha is the paisik of America, this is Asra. You know what I mean? Ba'asra Rebbe Yosef. You don't hold that has that in America.
I don't think Ramesh himself held that way. Ramesh held in a big city. There is no such thing as an Asra. That's why we have many Batei Din and in big cities because it's not the Asra of anybody.
So you don't look at him and say he's the Meirah of America.
I don't see how that can be said in international.
Okay, so that's a Chumrah. Give me an example of a kula.
A kula really is when you have a problem of, let's say, where you may go because of Shas Tzchak on something. I'm trying to think of offhand of something where the Shas Tzchak, clear, definitive Shas Tzchak. Let's say, for argument's sake, that you take a taxi on Shabbos because you're stuck in somewhere remote, and there's the Shitas Aruch, which the Mishnah says, B'shas Tzchak you can rely on, then Amir L'Nochri is mutter. So that would be a classic example of a kula.
Let me ask you another question, a Hashkafa question now. Is there anything wrong with adopting lots of chumras, saying, look, I'm going to be machmir, I want to accept all chumras, or establishing new chumras? Anything wrong with that?
Well, I wrote an article many years ago for the Jewish Observer on this topic, and I cited there Rav Dessler and others. Rav Dessler is very extreme. He says one should never accept upon oneself a chumrah which is not commonly observed because it can be rooted in gaiva and arrogance, and therefore it's not being done l'shem shamayim.
So there was a something I mentioned on our last program that we got a number of calls and emails about. There are schools, there's one particular school, let's say where I live in Monsey, they came out, they said now girls have to wear skirts that are 6 inches below the knee. They upped the 4 inches to 6 inches. Would you classify this as a chumrah that, like how would you look at something? And I want to use real life examples because halacha is mostly about real life.
Yeah, I don't see it's any halachic basis for that whatsoever. If there's some reason why they can explain, I said in my article that there are 4 basic reasons which validate chumras. One could first of all, there's a type of chumrah. Let's say you belong to a community. Let's say you're a brisker, and you are the Maggid on Yoshan, which I believe is a chumrah, because
wait, slow down. You believe Yoshan is a chumrah?
Yes.
The Shulchan Aruch says it.
I know, but it's a chumrah because we have, again, as you go back to my baseline definition before, suddenly where we have Gedolei HaPoskim who say it's mutter, and Puchazim Amadvar, Umesorah for thousands of years has been noeg to not keep Yoshan, so there becomes a chumrah to keep Yoshan.
Even though the Mechaber says that we should keep Yoshan.
Yes, because the Aruch HaShulchan explains very, at least for Ashkenazim, I'm not getting to Eidos HaMizrach, but at least for Ashkenazim, the Aruch HaShulchan explains very lucidly that the majority of Ashkenazic poskim, Rishonim, are Mekel.
Well, they were Mekel because they had no choice in those times. Clearly, today we have it. Today we clearly have. I mean, the reason why we're Mekel is the Bach, which is based on the Torah first.
I'm not going with the Bach. I am not going with the Bach. I am aware of the problems with the Bach. I am going with the Aruch HaShulchan. It's a different cheshbon. The Aruch HaShulchan says those Rishonim hold. That I think it's the Chumros and the.
That it's not Noeg B'chutz La'aretz.
No, it's Noeg B'chutz La'aretz, but only places which are close to Eretz Yisrael, not places which are distant to Eretz Yisrael.
So you consider that's a chumrah to be machber on Yoshan?
Yes. So
okay.
Actually, I wrote that in my article, the Jewish Observer article, so that was cleared by the whoever edited the articles at the time.
Okay, so continue on your thing. You were saying there were 4 reasons for chumras.
Right. So again, the first one I just said is that when your posek says you have to be machmir. The second one is out of Avas Hashem. Third one is out of Yiras Hashem, and the fourth one is to distance oneself from Gashmias. I think those are the 4 legitimate reasons for chumras.
Give us an example of each one.
Each one it can be the chumrah. If a person decides I want to give a gift to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so that's a chumrah me'ahava. I'm doing this as a special sign of devotion to Hashem, even though I don't have to do it. If a person feels that a sense of moira, therefore a person wants to distance himself from things.
Give us an example of something that's a sign of devotion to Hashem.
No. If you kept Chol Yisrael because you wanted to devote yourself more to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's chumrah me'ahava. If you kept Chol Yisrael because of Yiras Hashem, in other words, you're afraid, you want to demonstrate that you step back and don't do things which you might possibly do because of Yiras Hashem. That's a chumrah yira. If you do it because if you do it because you can get a Hershey bar or Nestle's bar or anywhere, and that would be too much indulgence for you, so that would be a chumrah because of distancing oneself from Gashmias.
So let me now extend that. Now, when somebody says, I want to wear my skirt 6 inches below my knee, the school says such a thing, what would the school would definitely take the argument, well, that's either me'ahava, me'ayira, etc. Why would you reject that?
I highly doubt that the school actually put that in the letter. If they did put that in the letter, it would be an interesting perspective, which could then be argued whether this actually will add to the Avas Yiras Hashem of the individual girls.
Well, let me ask you a question. Could somebody make a chumrah that's mehavu me'yira that has no halachic basis? No.
I had Rosh Yeshiva once who said that he had the Baal Bus who told him that he doesn't close bottles on Shabbos. In other words, any bottle, just a pop bottle, a soda bottle. So Rosh Yeshiva said to him, there's no basis for that in halacha. He was saying it makes an ohel to recover it again. So that Baal Bus said, you have your chumras and I have my chumras. So it doesn't work like that.
Okay, so when somebody says something like this, they make some new edict like 6 inches. Would you say that there's no halachic basis and therefore it's not a chumrah?
It's not. You mean it's not? It's It could be. You can say it's like a hit or mitzvah to do that. And again, a hit or mitzvah also has to be based in one of these 4 reasons.
Now let me ask you a question: is there anything wrong with somebody saying, look, it's not one of these 4 things, but I don't want to close the bottle cap because I have like a certain feeling about it, and I'm making up my new chumrah. Is there anything wrong with making up chumras?
Well, the Officer Rabbi Nassim tells us you're not allowed to do that. Officer Nassim tells us that was why Adam was responsible for Chava eating from the tree, because he added on this chumrah of not touching the tree. So,
and is this brought halachically?
yes, you're not supposed to add on chumras unless you say, first of all, unless you say explicitly this is a chumrah, but then it has to, again, be based on one of those four reasons.
Okay, let me just, to make it halachic basis, the Beis Yosef in Yeridei Kuf Tezvav brings Yerushalmi. Kishem she'asur lahater es ha'asur, kach asur le'eser es hamuter. And the Shach brings it, in Haggis Harosis of a Heter, and the Groy in Evan Shleimer actually talks about it. He says it interestingly. He says the Yetzahara ba'al adam b'shtei tainus. The Yetzahara comes from two sides. One, Shavodas Hashem mi efshar lamed ba. It's just too difficult, and it's too much. Vashniya shemar le'terim. He says he goes to the right and he goes to the left. The right is rather. He says it's just with chumras and chumras and chumras, and at a certain point in life, a person just says, "Look, I can't do it." Somebody else said, he said, "Are kids going off the derech, or does the derech just keep getting narrower and narrower?"
Good. Very good insight. Yes.
No, I'll tell you. I'm calling you from Eretz Yisrael, where I'm doing this week's program, and I walked into a store, and somebody came over and they introduced themselves to me, and it was a son of one of the biggest Rosh Yeshivas in America, and he's wearing an earring and he has like purple hair, and he says, "Do you remember me?" And I didn't remember him. He says, "Yeah, I was in your house on Purim," and I just looked at the guy and I gave him a say, "Hello, how are you?" And two different occasions this happened to me, one with a boy and one in a girl, and I just was wondering, could it be that maybe, sometimes if it keeps getting narrower and narrower, some people are able to manage it and some people aren't. Do you think that's a possibility?
I think it's possible, especially when no explanations are given, which is another problem, which is where it deserves another conversation, that questions are suppressed and answers are not given.
Rabbi Bechoffer, in your experience as a mechanech, like Kulis, Chumras, how do you see, kids affected by them? Do they add to the chinuch or do they subtract? Like, give us a few examples, real life examples.
Well, I once had a class of kids who are not off the derech, but we're on the verge, let's say. So I made for them a minyan where we said the minimum. We didn't say P'sukei Zimra, though we said Baruch Shamar, Asher Yishtabach, and Birkos Kriyashman Otachnun, and then Asher Votzion. There's a famous statement from Rav Hutner, why they only say one minimal amount of slichus during slichus in Klein, Berlin. Tov Ma'at Shelo B'Kavana, Me'Harbei Shelo B'Kavana. So one has to always find the optimum, actually, to try and make them more kavana, even if it means being lenient, because again, our children today are very often, especially matters concerning avodas Hashem, not given reasons, not given the inspiration, and not given the profound insight which is necessary in order to require higher demands from the kids. And it turns a lot of them off. They don't feel that this is something which speaks to them. Why should they be doing it? I'm not saying that this applies to all the children. Certainly, there are children who are fervent in their observance and sincere about it. But the idea of jumping madregas is a very dangerous one.
Rabbi Bechoffer, this is my job. This is what I get paid for. Let me give you the other side of it. Okay, we live in a world that is very extreme, right? The Democrats have become, crazy left, right? The Republicans have become, I know we have a lot of Republican listeners, but honestly, a little bit crazy, right? And there is no more middle left in society, or certainly seems to be some vacuum at the middle. So isn't there a danger when we accept, moderateness, that if the world around you is burning, and you accept moderacy as sort of a path. So for kids need to have something to feel very passionate about. So when we accept chumras and halacha and we go all the way to the right, it gives them a sense of passion, a sense of belonging, a sense of mission, whereas if we go the derech hamamutza, right, on the contrary, it could be detracting to children. What do you think about that argument?
One rabbi once said, a rabbi who was known as a
Before you answer, let me give you an example. When I was in yeshiva, we used to do mishmeres in the Mir Thursday night, and often there was like a competition. Who could stay up all night? What's the pshat? In other words, how much could you learn? Because to learn, like a moderate amount, like a nice starim, it was that extra push that lit the passion of the guys. And a lot of the guys became real mitzuyanim, became big Talmidei Chachamim, etc. It's that where you break, you go past the norm, you stress yourself. That's where you exceed. That's where it ignites. Yeah, I'm talking about Mipsari Echse. How do you feel about that?
It's interesting that you mentioned that. I heard, when I was in the mirror, I heard a shmooze from Reb Shlomo Karlbach, who used to do the Mashgiach in Chaim Berlin. And I don't remember the whole shmooze, but I remember how he opened the shmooze. And he said, something along these lines. He said, let's put all our cards on the table. We have to know, and we have to understand that all of our avodah is based on gaiva. All of the yeshiva system is based on gaiva. Who can have the biggest bragging rights? And then that's why we have these competitive atmospheres in the yeshivas. And then he went on.
It's a chazal, doesn't it say kinna say from Dar Bechachma?
Yeah, it's not guys. That's not the same.
What is kinna say from about? It's about he gets. I don't know. That's what jealousy means. I look at him and I feel that I'm a second-class citizen.
That's not what kinna say from Dar Bechachma means. Kinna say means I want to be like him, not I want to be better.
What does it mean? Vayigba liboy, loshin gaiva. Vayigba liboy, v'darkei Hashem.
So vayigba liboy, v'darkei Hashem means you should know that you as an Eved Hashem, after the Kutsha Brichu, you have a special madrega in the world. Not because you're personal accomplishments, but because you have been represented at Kodesh Baruch Hu in the world.
Okay.
I wanted myself. So there was once a rabbi who said that the problem with moderation is that you cannot be zealous about moderation, which is the point of raising. Yes. So the way I approach these things is that I don't think that Hislavus, while it is a powerful tool, can be the basis for long-term Hatzlacha and Avodas Hashem, because then one could get passionate about other things as well. Passion is a very dangerous thing. So therefore, my perspective is that one has to provide an intellectual basis for everything one tries to teach and tries to impart to one's Talmidim and one's the people who are Shomei Likho, people who are listening to you, which means that every person, everything has to be explained, and it should be explained preferably in many ways, because Shivim Panim L'Torah, and it should be represented as something which makes sense, not as something which we're demanding of you to do. And that way, even if it's lacking in passion, it's much more solidly grounded, and it's going to be much more long-lasting.
Well, Rabbi Bechoffer, thank you very much for your time.
Okay, a pleasure.
Kulta. We have the honor of having with us on the phone from Munich, Germany, Rabbi Yehuda Aaron Horovitz, who is Yosef, his father, Rashiva in Dvar Yerushalayim. He's an Einikel of the Aruch Laner. He printed many tshuvas of the Aruch Laner. He's printed many Sfarim, many history Sfarim. He's a Talmud of Ber Yankiv in Chevron. He lives in Har Nof. He has smicha from a Gaon Reb Zalman Chaim Goldberg. He's an expert in Kisvei Yad. He's written history about the Aruch HaShulchan and many other Gedolim. So you could say he's an expert, a Jewish historian of Rabbanim. Welcome, Rav Horovitz.
Good evening. Thank you.
So, Rav Horovitz, tell us, it seems to me that the world has gone a little bit like there's left and right. And it's not just the Jewish world. And, in the United States, you have the Democrats have gone extremely left. The Republicans have gone extremely right. In Israel seems full of extreme parties. And we as Am Yisrael, we have now all types, you have the settlers and everybody there seems to be a lot of extremism. And my question to you is, can you give us, as an expert in history, in Yiddish history, and certainly in Orthodox history, give us a little bit of a history of extremism? Has it always been this way? Has it changed? Give us some thoughts on it.
Okay, before we expand on this question of extremism, we have to first define what extremism means. First of all, is every I would say every battle or every time a dispute arises and people take sides, that doesn't mean there's extremism. If we define the word extremism as a movement, what you want to call, if there is an idea and some people take an extreme side on that idea and maybe many thousands of people or hundreds of people join it as a movement, as an idea, maybe there is such a phenomena. I don't think there is that a specific phenomenon, so it looks that way. But let's take a simple disputes that took place in Am Yisrael. If you want to call what you call in Hebrew kanoes or kanaut datit, religious zealousy, zealots, or if you mean extremism by zealousy, you want to say maybe when people took Yiddishkeit and saw themselves as what we call shlichim, or messengers of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and people that take that idea to an extreme where they force it upon the whole of Am Yisrael. We can take the example of Bais Sheni and all the stories in Yosef Flavius and Yosef Matisyahu when he talks all about the history of the Kanaut, of the Kanoim, that maybe according to some historians definitely has something to do with the Churban HaBayis. And we see Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai try to neutralize it. And if you take that as an example of extremism, definitely there was extremism in Am Yisrael. But if we want to take extremism in our generation,
by the way, with disastrous results, by the way.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, exactly. The Baryanim, who Rashi calls Anoshim Reikim, Anoshim Reikim, Poichazim L'Mulchama, had disastrous results. I mean, they actually caused the Churban.
Exactly, and if history tells us there were groups in Yerushalayim that finally they went to Metzada and they tried to kill people because of the idea that we can't have the Romans to rule over us, and that extreme right, what you might call it in our generation, extreme nationalism or extreme right, maybe did exist in Am Yisrael and didn't follow what the Manhigei Ador at that time expected them to do. You want to maybe take, sometimes that type of extremism was endorsed by Chazal. Take the Hashmonaim on Hanukkah. Yeah? And maybe we don't know exactly what Hashem want. Let's put it this way: what does Hashem want from us? We have the idea we have already in Parshas Pinchos. Yeah, we have the idea of Kanoin Poigin Boy. But these are very, I would say, what defines Kanoin Poigin Boy in Pinchos is individual person. I would say even Hashmonaim, it's individual person. It's not a movement in Am Yisrael. It's not a kind of fraction of the Jewish people. It's an individual case, an individual person, or individual group. But I don't think there was ever an extreme group in Am Yisrael that says this is what the Torah wants from us, extremism, in the sense of killing other people in the name of that extremism. We definitely don't, since Chazal, we don't have such a thing. The last 2,000 years, since the Churban, we never had in the history.
So let's go back to the question.
Yes.
It seems to me, I could sit here and we could probably name 10 or 15 different extreme groups within the Jewish community. Has it always been so fractious? Have we always had, this element of extremism historically, or is it something that is relatively more recent?
I feel that it's a new phenomena. I think the phenomena has to do with the fact that we are more centralized and urbanized than ever. The Jewish people went to various galuyos, and at least the last 1,000 years, the centers of Jewish life were so dispersed that all these phenomena were unknown from one community to the next, almost. So it's not like we all live in Yerushalayim, Bnei Brak, or New York, London, and know about each group, can say that group is extreme compared to me. And I think that way of life, a Jewish way of life that used to be where a person lived in a shtetl, the way he lived, he wasn't even aware if he's extreme or not. The majority of the Jews kept a certain traditional religious way of life, and maybe to someone living in a certain country, the person living in a different place was considered extreme, but he didn't even know about it.
So you're saying we were always so extremist, just we weren't aware of it?
No, not extreme. It depends what you call extreme. But I'm saying if you give me an example of what extreme is, if let's say I say that someone wearing a shal is extreme, in Mea Shearim you have a group of women wearing.
I'll give you a list. Yes, the burqa.
That's an example. That's a good example.
Yes.
A group of ladies decided to wear a black tent, whatever you want to call it, covering the whole body. If this group would be living in Afghanistan, or somewhere in a place where the Muslims dress like that, and the norm of the Jews in that place were to dress that way.
I understand that, but
nothing extreme about it.
I understand, but if they lived in Ukraine someplace today, it would still be considered extreme.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm saying, but Rabbi Horovitz, we find extremism. These people with the shalv are not living in Afghanistan; they're living in Mea Shearim. Exactly. So my question to you is, why do we have the rise of extremism in our own communities that we've never had before?
Most of them are what you call Bali Tshuva. Most of them are people that...
Okay, so let me move on. Let's talk about, Rabbi Horowitz, look at the Peleg people.
Yes.
Sitting on the street, screaming, Auschwitz v'lo l'tzava.
Yeah.
I mean, would you agree that that's a little bit of extreme?
Not a little bit, that's very extreme.
And these people's names, again, their names are Cohen and Friedman and Zelakovitz.
Yeah,
where does this come from, this craziness?
I think that the people sitting on the streets, and I think in general, the way of protest of what's become now some kind of norm of certain extreme groups to protest that way, I don't think this ever existed in the diaspora I've heard of. I think it came from, you won't believe what I'm going to say, but I think they learned it from those elements of the secular Jews to normalize the Jewish people, and we are a normal democracy where people fight for their rights, and obviously we didn't learn it in yeshiva, but we learned it from the norms of a normal society, a normal secular society.
Rabbi Horowitz, can you tell me the last demonstration in secular society where people sat on the road, blocked the highway so that thousands of people couldn't get to work, people couldn't get to weddings, and couldn't get to the house? Could you tell me, I live in New York, could you tell me the last time a demonstration like this happened in the United
Israel,
States?
some demonstrations go that way, and it didn't come, I'm telling you now, it didn't come from the religious circles. The Chaim never demonstrated that way, never demonstrated to begin with. Neither did any Rebbe, any Hasidic Rebbe ever demonstrate that way. No Rosh Yeshiva or leader of any Haredi group ever demonstrate that way. This was learned from, and I'm talking also about, they learned it is taken from various protests that took place in Israeli society by definitely not religious Jews.
But can you name a demonstration where people lay down on highways to prevent ladies who are birthing to get from the hospital? Where did that come from?
I remember there was some protest for the rights of I think it was the cripples or the nurses. There's all sorts of strikes and protests. They do have that. But I won't go into details. I'm just saying it's not.
Can I give you, Rabbi Horowitz? Can I give you a theory? Can I give you a theory?
Yes.
Let me give you a theory. I think that we used to live, at least in my memory, we used to live in homogeneous societies.
Yeah.
It means where I grew up, there was a Chassidish, a Belzer family to my left. To my right, there was a Freie family. Next to them was a Chafetz Chaim family.
Yeah.
This is growing up in Brooklyn, right?
Yeah.
So you learned that there's a Chassidische, there's a Freie, there's a Moderne, there's a this, and you saw different views of the world, and you accept that people come in many different stripes, right?
Yes.
Today, there's Kiryat Bells, there's Kiryat Sans, everybody is now moved together. The groups have created very tight concentric circles. And fanaticism breeds when you don't see any other opinion. There's only one way. This is the only way to live. So the more we have become sort of,
one-dimensional,
ghettoized, right, one-dimensional, it gives breed for extremism. It's just you only see one view, one way of living, one this, and then it builds on itself. Is that a possible theory?
Definitely could be. I'm not such an expert on this, but it could be, definitely. It makes sense, yeah. Do
you see extremism? Do you see extremism as good or bad for Klal Yisrael?
Yeah, I see it as a terrible, terrible phenomenon. Very bad. First of all,
tell us why.
What you mentioned before, these Peleg, these things. I see the only good thing that comes of it is nothing good. The only good thing that comes from it, from my point of view, is to see how bad a person becomes when he doesn't care about another person, how bad midas, how behavioral upbringing is the most important thing. To educate your children to have good midas, simple. Nothing, no philosophy, just that good behavior, simple, good, well-mannered behavior is the basis of being a good Jew, nothing else. Because that behavior doesn't come from anywhere. And you just look in the Gemara, Yom Pevov, and it's a copy of what you should say to them. That's all. How do you do? If a person sees a Ben Torah acting a certain way, he'll say, I want to be like him. And if you see someone who looks frum and behaves bad to another person, all you want to say is, and it distances people away from Torah. That's all it does. I can say something else. I'd like to say as follows. I think, and this is where the Briskerov comes into mind. The Briskerov said whoever protests against what he called then the Zionist or the government, the Israeli government, is apikoros, or he himself is a Zionist. Why? Because in Russia or in Lithuania or in Hungary, no Jew would dare protest like that. Why? Because if
they would have killed them.
So he said, why here? Why can you do it here? Because it's Jews. It's a Jewish government. So you rely on it. You can do what you want, and they won't kill you. So that means you think that the Jew.
It's an Israeli phenomenon.
Won't kill you. So it shows you rely on your Shomayim of the Israeli government. So you're Tziyoni. And I think that brought me thinking that it could be the reason that the Naturkarte or all the Afghanis and the Peleg and all these protests could only take place in the situation of a Jewish government ruling in Israel. And those people protesting feel at home. They feel...
So these large protests of lying in the streets, etc., they're basically an Eretz Yisraelic invention. And it, like you say, from the Briskerov, it comes from people who recognize that they could get away with it because the government is not going to be killing any Jews.
That's why they can shout Nazi. Yeah. Listen, if they shout on a guy in Ukraine Nazi, he won't be offended. You shout at a Yid, Nazi, wow, he did something terrible to him. So it's like you look at him, it's your cousin. You can. That's familiar. That's the familiar feeling. You're familiar with him. But let's go back to the idea of extremism. And the Rambam's Shvil HaZahav, the golden path, where, again, maybe this is also good to talk about it, about the fact that the person...
Derech
HaMemutza, mainly, also generally in Yiddishkeit, but mainly when the Rambam talks about Deus, about Midas, that when a person works on his character traits, of anger, of jealousy, of being lustful and tivus, and all sorts of various character traits to try and work on the middle path. And maybe the only one, he says, you should maybe try and be extreme is another. Even that, I would say, if a person is very extreme and maybe affects his self-esteem and he gets inferiority complexes and it might affect him psychologically, so he shouldn't be going that direction. And this is where I'm coming back to the extremism in Judaism and all these groups, because the Rambam tries to talk about these things. I think, obviously, he says it's a mitzvah v'olachta b'drochov. To fulfill the mitzvah, following Hashem's footsteps, is trying to go in the middle path. Why does he say that? Because he takes v'olachta b'drochov of ma'u chanun, afato chanun, ma'u rachum, afato rachum, as HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself being the creator of the world in a certain way of balance. The world can't exist without that very, very exact balance between heat and cold, between all sorts of other forces of nature, and also the human being, or all the creation of the world, is based on balance, on the middle path. And V'olachta b'drochov, following in Hashem's footsteps, that's the tafkid of a person in this world, as the Vilna Gaon says, to work on your midas, to do it in that way of the middle path. And here I'm coming to the other idea that we spoke about, of these extreme groups of burqa ladies have left the hole, of extreme chumros. And usually, I'm not talking about large groups that follow a certain idea that looks extreme. I'm talking about very small groups of certain people that you see that do something in an obsessive way. And it could be sometimes they are using Yiddishkeit as a cover-up to the psychological problems, or to certain disorders, as you want to call it maybe. If someone washes his hands for bread, instead of 3 times each hand, 30 times, he needs a psychiatrist. If someone is extreme, and it's nothing to do with Yiddishkeit, and sometimes say, but he has nerven, and they use brisk, and usually people that are very extreme need help. It's nothing to do with the Torah. It's nothing to do with Yiddishkeit. They need help. And some people that join these extreme groups are people that didn't grow up with a certain direction in life. And you'll find most of them grew up with no direction, and they're looking for direction. Some of them need help.
Rabbi Horovitz, thank you very much for your time.
It's my pleasure. Batzlocha, Rabbi. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. We have the honor of having with us on the phone Dr. Paul Offit. He's an American pediatrician specializing in infectious diseases, vaccines, immunology, and virology. He's the co-inventor of the rotavirus vaccine. Offit is the Maurice R. Hillman Professor of Vaccinology, Professor of, excuse me, they'll take out the thing, but you have quite a CV, but they'll cut it out. Okay, Professor of Pediatrics at the Perelman School of Medicine at the University of Pennsylvania, former Chief of the Division of Infectious Disease and Director of Vaccine, et cetera, et cetera. Welcome, Dr. Offit.
Thank you, David.
Dr. Offit, we have many parents who call us up and they say, notwithstanding the fact that so much of, medicine, so much data, so many physicians have come out and said there is no connection between vaccine and autism or various diseases. But what can I do? My neighbor's son got a vaccine and his leg swelled up and he changed, et cetera, et cetera. How do we respond to that?
Well, I think it's perfectly fair to ask the question. I mean, from the parent's standpoint, my child was fine. They got a vaccine. Now they're not fine. And whatever that not fine was, whether it was autism or diabetes or multiple sclerosis or attention deficit disorder, they ask the question, and that's fair. The good news is that these are answerable questions. You can determine whether or not a vaccine caused autism by looking at now hundreds of thousands of children who did or didn't get that vaccine to see whether or not there's an increased risk in the vaccinated group. I think what happens is when those studies are done again and again and again, and right now if you use autism as an example, we have 18 such studies. I think most parents are reassured by that, but some aren't. And I think when they aren't, when 18 studies doesn't reassure them, then I think they cross the line from being skeptical about vaccines to being cynical about vaccines, and I'm not sure there's any easy way to come back from that.
Yeah, well, what happens, I agree with what you're saying, but when the mother says, look, I saw the baby swell up the day after, lose movement in her limbs, etc., like, I guess the response is it's just anecdotal and it's just a big coincidence. Like, what would be the response?
Well, that's the question. I mean, was it a temporal association? Was it a causal association? You know, the rooster crows, the sun comes up. The rooster crows, the sun comes up. Is the rooster causing the sun to come up? I mean, the story I tell, because it's true, is my wife, who's a private practicing pediatrician, goes into the office on a weekend. She's helping the nurse give vaccines. A mother is sitting with her 4-month-old on her lap. While my wife is drawing the vaccine up into the syringe, right? She hasn't given it yet. The 4-month-old has a seizure, goes on to have a permanent seizure disorder, and dies at age 5 or 6 of a chronic neurological condition. Now, I think if that vaccine had been given 5 minutes earlier, I think that mother would have said, I have a vaccine-damaged child. My child got a vaccine. 5 minutes later, had a seizure, now has a chronic neurological disorder. I know what I saw. So that's what you're up against. You're up against a powerful emotional experience, and you're trying to combat that basically with statistical information, which is hard.
Now, Dr. Offit, do you think everybody should be given all vaccines? Like, we would agree. I mean, there are many vaccines. The MMR vaccine is absolutely crucial. But today there's like dozens of vaccines. Does every child need a hepatitis B vaccine? I mean, somebody who's not going to be using needles and not going to live a life of multiple partners. Are there diseases that you could say, it's true vaccines are wonderful, but given that the pharmaceutical companies are for-profit corporations, given that the fact that they have immunity, maybe it could be taken advantage of. Is there any logic to that?
Well, let's use the hepatitis B vaccine as an example. So children in the United States, starting in 1991, newborns were recommended to receive the hepatitis B vaccine in a series of 3 doses. At the time that recommendation was made, every year in the United States, 18,000 children less than 10 years of age would get hepatitis B. And if they got it in the newborn period, they had a 90% chance of going on to develop cancer or chronic liver disease, so-called cirrhosis. Now, of those 18,000 children, 9,000 were born to mothers who had hepatitis B, but the other 9,000 weren't. They got the disease from relatively casual contact. They weren't getting it from tattoos. They weren't getting it from sharing needles. They weren't getting it from having sex. They were getting it from relatively casual contact. Because we gave that vaccine starting in 1991, we have virtually eliminated that disease in the less than 19-year-old. I mean, if you take another disease like polio, I mean, you could argue, why am I getting a polio vaccine in the United States? We haven't seen polio in this country since the 1970s. And the answer is because polio still walks into this country. You can be sure of it. I mean, only 1 of every 200 people with polio, meaning symptomatic polio, has symptoms. And so the rest just shed the virus in their stools. Do I think that people shedding polio from Pakistan or Afghanistan or Nigeria walk into LAX, the Los Angeles airport, or walk into LaGuardia, the New York airport every year? Yes. So lower your guard far enough, and that disease too can come back. So as long as vaccines are safe and as long as they're effective, then you should get them. Otherwise, you put your child at unnecessary risk for no benefit.
Are there vaccines? Do you think how many vaccines today does your average, are recommended per child?
Okay, so in the first few years of life, children are recommended to receive vaccines to prevent 14 different diseases. When adolescents, you also get another few vaccines, meningococcus, HPV, and also Tdap. So there's another 3 vaccines you would get as an adolescent.
And do you think every one of them should be given to every child? Like, do you think they've gone overboard at all?
No, unless there's a medical contraindication. So, for example, someone is immune compromised and therefore can't receive a live attenuated or weakened viral vaccine. No, I think they're all important. That's why they should all be given.
Okay, that leads us to the next question, which you sort of preempted. We've spoken to a Dr. Schoenfeld. You probably heard of him, Dr. Yehuda Schoenfeld.
Yes, I've heard of him.
He's very famous. He's authored well over 1,000 papers, peer-reviewed papers. And his opinion, he said that there are many. His expertise. One of his areas of expertise are people who have autoimmune diseases, and he's of the belief that vaccines could be damaging to people who have compromised autoimmune systems. So he says two interesting statements. He says vaccines are the greatest single public health policy that's ever been put forth to the world. And at the same time, he says, and people who have compromised autoimmune systems can very often be damaged by vaccines. Do you agree with that statement?
Well, it doesn't matter what he says. The only thing that matters is what the data show. What Dr. Schoenfeld has put forth is this notion of ASIA, autoimmune syndrome induced by adjuvants, for which he has virtually no support. In fact, people now have tried to look at his contention by doing the kinds of retrospective controlled studies that will allow you to answer the question, are you at increased risk of an autoimmune disease if you've gotten a vaccine or if you haven't? HPV vaccine is one that sort of has come under the gun by him and others, and now many studies, and says formally, frankly, that vaccine has been studied in more than 1 million people post-licensure, and he's wrong. So it doesn't matter what he says any more than it matters what I say. What matters is what the data show. And right now, the data do not support his contention.
So is there anybody else who supports his contention? I mean, you agree he's a very he's not an anti-vaccine doctor. He's a very, very highly honored doctor. You would say that he put forth a theory, but there's just no collaboration, evidentiary collaboration of it.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay. What would you say?
And also, just as another point, I mean, Linus Pauling won 2 Nobel Prizes. I mean, he won a Nobel Prize in chemistry for his work on the alpha helix, sort of secondary and tertiary structure of proteins. He won a Nobel Prize for peace. I mean, he was a smart guy, certainly. And then he came to believe that vitamin C could treat cancer as well as a variety of other diseases for which he had no evidence. So there's a guy who's well known, certainly had an enormous reputation, who was wrong. So it doesn't really matter what Linus Pauling said or what Dr. Schoenfeld says. The only thing that matters is what data show. Period. It's not political. It shouldn't have anything to do with religion. It is simply a matter of the data, the science. I mean, science really isn't or shouldn't be political.
Yeah, the only reason people respect him, he's on the editorial board of 43 medical journals. It says here he's published over 1,900 peer-reviewed articles, and he is one of the world's leading experts in autoimmune diseases, which are not highly understood. So it's like, this is sort of like a little bit of autoimmune diseases are a relatively developing field. We know very little about them. And he says he's seen case study where people have taken it and it's triggered autoimmune diseases that were repressed in their system. So given the fact that we know so little about autoimmune diseases, doesn't that give us some pause for thought?
Well, certainly we're going to know more 100 years from now than we know now. Certainly we're continuing to learn. But if you take, for example, this contention that for example, HPV vaccine causes primary ovarian failure, right, which was supported by a series of anecdotes. In other words, got a vaccine, developed primary ovarian failure, which proved, frankly, only that vaccines don't prevent primary ovarian failure. So what you have to do then are large studies looking at children who did or didn't get that vaccine to see whether or not the incidence of primary ovarian failure is greater in a vaccinated group. And whenever those studies are done with large numbers of either adults or children, one doesn't find that contention. So anecdotes are not evidence, and I think that's where Dr. Schoenfeld lives. So reputation or not, it still comes down to the data, and he doesn't have those data. Also, I don't completely agree that we don't know anything about autoimmune disease. I think we know a lot about the notion of molecular mimicry and what it takes, frankly, to break host tolerance. And I think that requires far more than what vaccines can do. I'll give you an example. So the influenza vaccine, for example, the influenza A virus, the protein on the surface of that virus, the hemagglutinin, can actually mimic myelin basic protein. So myelin basic protein is a protein that lines, it's part of the sheaths of nerves, right? It's the lining of nerves. When you develop an immune response to myelin basic protein, you get basically multiple sclerosis. That's the basis of multiple sclerosis. So when you're naturally infected with influenza, you actually increase your body's frequency of T and B cells directed against myelin basic protein and worsen your multiple sclerosis. You don't cause it, but you worsen it. When you get a vaccine, however, that doesn't happen because the vaccine virus doesn't reproduce itself. I mean, the influenza vaccine is whole-killed virus, so it doesn't, or it only has really hemagglutinin neuraminidase. It doesn't reproduce itself. So So whereas if you're naturally infected with influenza, you worsen your multiple sclerosis. When you're vaccinated with influenza, you don't. Or said another way, the influenza vaccine prevents exacerbations of multiple sclerosis.
When you say that his work has been sort of in this area has not been collaborated, a little bit somewhat, I guess, debunked, which studies are you referring to?
So so the Vaccine Education Center at Children's Hospital Philadelphia has a website. When you go into the landing page, it says vaccine safety references. We have a series of references relating to autoimmunity, of which there are many. And so I'm not going to go list them for you now, but they're easy to find. That's how you find them.
Dr. Offit, thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Take care.
We have on the phone with us Rabbi Yitzchok Feldheim. He was Aish Hatorah's national lecturer for many years, appearing on many, many campuses. He was a Kiruv Rav for many years. He's certainly in America one of the biggest experts on Kiruv. Welcome, Rabbi Yitzchok.
Shalom Aleichem, Reb David.
Rabbi Yitzchok, give us a synopsis. Name 10 or 15 campuses you've lectured on. I don't know, but I want you to just tell us your creds, what they would say.
Okay, all right. The fancy one, I'll give you a little of everything, Yale, Yale, NYU, Columbia, Wharton, University of Pennsylvania, Penn State, Rutgers, Austin, Tucson and Tempe and Madison and UCLA, all the UCLAs, in Canada I've spoken for, McGill, Concordia. Basically, any campus with at least 500 Jewish students has a makarov already on campus, and they bring me out to speak. So I've spoken at virtually every camp for the student. Sometimes the Shabbaton of a lot of schools together. Like I'll go to Chicago, I'll do all of their schools. I've been to Detroit, for University of Michigan. But sometimes they're all zusammen, in one Shabbaton. But I've been on every campus with 500 to 1,000 Jewish kids.
Okay, so my question to you is, I've been following, the last week they had an anti-vax rally in Monsey. And I was curious, I went online and I went to the HuffPost, I think it was the Times, the New York Times, and it reached 1 billion people, right? Just as a matter of beini beincha, you wonder. It says Chilul Hashem is not nischaper. It's the biggest aveira that a person could do. Or Yischal Hashem Kadshi. How does a person take it upon their own shoulders to embarrass from a people in front of 1 billion? A minimum of 1 billion is just, to me, is a davapella. If it says it's ein in nischaper ela b'misa, how deep in Gehenim does a billion person? But I was looking at the comments, and the comments are, all these people left from the 13th century, or, this goes back to the old dogma that the Jews produce diseases. It's back to the Middle Ages, right?
Right.
Or if you lock your brain in a box and bury it underground by becoming religious, what does this do to that Friar kid on campus? Does it have an effect or not?
Right. I'll tell you. The specific example of the anti-vaxxers has a more limited, in my mind, the more limited discussion than I would if we switched it to things like way you dress.
So let me give you the 4 or 5. You could mention those, but I'll tell you the 4 or 5 that we have put together. We put together anti-vaxxer, Neturei Karta, something that you would know about, but it does get some policy. Peleg, those they ride down in front of ambulances or roads in Eretz Yisrael because they don't want to go to the army. The anti-woman, the burqa, etc. But all of these extremists, it could be, what does this do to when you go to a campus? Does it have an effect? Or we had on Jonathan Rosenblum, we interviewed Jonathan Rosenblum, and he said, there's so many people, they go to the workforce, they're not derech eretz, that has, he sort of wasn't particularly overwhelmed by the effect, but he's not out on the campus. What would you say?
Right. So first, okay, so I'm not speaking to the anti-vax. I want to leave it out because I don't know what that has to do with Yiddishkeit. I'm here to talk about Yiddishkeit. Somehow that got added in here, and
Well, it only has something to do. It has nothing to do with Yiddishkeit.
Right.
Like the fellow who spoke, I don't even know if he has a high school degree. So there's no medical, there's no Yiddishkeit. Yeah, everything, you could say don't drive a Lexus because it's Shmartav Nafsh Yisechem and it could go fast. So you could tie, but the answer has nothing to do with Yiddishkeit. But I'm asking you, what damage do the articles and the Litzanis and the Macquarie have when you go to a campus?
Right. So let me say this. There's first of all, I'll go in order, like, they affect us in different ways. First is the Hashkafic thing. The idea that Yiddishkeit is being portrayed somehow as ascetic, as that we're into suffering and we're removed from the world, the priesthood, that Yiddishkeit is seen as priesthood, like any other extreme religion is. So that's a huge toyus, I believe. That's not political, it's not practical. It's just, as a Kiruv guy who's selling Haskafa, and I'm teaching Haskafa, my obstacle is I see Yiddishkeit as lichtig. Yiddishkeit, even the Rishonim, when they talk about precious, what's precious for? Precious is it builds character, maybe, makes you stronger, or precious it's to be pirish from lower level things, like don't be into achila, be into chachma. Again, it's not about not enjoying the world, it's that there's better enjoyment. The mashal I usually go to a chasna, I tell you don't eat the rice because there's pastrami. That's not called precious. I'm saying go live large. Don't cop out. So the idea of separation from the world in Torah is antithetical to Yiddishkeit. The world, we see the world as a gan, and our job is to go dance in the gan. And all of Yiddishkeit is there to help you be happier. And so as soon as Yiddishkeit is portrayed as being repressive, and God wants us to submit ourselves, and the guf is evil, and so that already undermines the entire premise of Yiddishkeit. Not just, by the way, not just for Freya people, for frum people also. How many frum people think it's holier to cry than to laugh? How many frum people think that they're holy when they're suffering? I'm Kaddish when Yom Kippur, and if I'm standing, I'm holier than when I'm sitting. And when I don't understand what's going on, that's holier than understanding, because the more it hurts. So that whole attitude of raising up the people who are into, people being serious as opposed to people being joyful is damaging to everybody. That's my the first Torah. The other sugyas like this, and this is where I can play devil's advocate a little bit, and the truth is, it might even explain a little bit the anti-vax thing. Even normally reasonable people, is that we're raising frum kids, and this is our priority. And we live in a world that's trying to make us insecure. They paint us all as extremists. If we all got vaccines tomorrow and we all got internet tomorrow, we're still wearing the clothing we wear. We're still snuim. Nothing that we're going to do is going to get close to losing the title extremist. So you got to put it in perspective. In people's minds, if we changed everything that frum people find objectionable, we would be in exactly the same place, swimming uphill in a secular world that is so tolerant. If you believe that you shouldn't be killing unborn babies, you're an extremist. Everything we do is extremist. So we're nitpicking about where to draw the line. That's a small defense of the extremists, is that they sort of realize, and they're practical and realistic, that we're extremists no matter what. I've had people yell at me that we make our kids we're walking to shul on Shabbos when I was a Rav in Yardley, and people walking that, how can you make your kids wear ties and suits? It's 80 degrees. People feel the right to knock religious people because we're automatically seen as extremists, even though we could be the most open-minded of frum Yidden. And our positions on women and aliyahs and women counting for minions, there's no way to escape from the extremist thing. That said, there are two reasons to embrace. Okay, I don't want to sound like an extremist myself, but there's two reasons a little bit to talk about not being scared of extremism. One is our children cannot grow up being made to feel insecure. When people laugh at us, so when children feel guilty or ashamed, it's damaging to the kehillah. And manhigim realize this. And that is why there's a tendency in the frum world to double down. And people are embracing positions that they don't even normally really believe themselves, because we can't fold. It's the same reason why when it comes to shmad, even a shoelace, the color of a shoelace is Yeharad Valyavar. This is the oldest thing in Yiddishkeit. You have to be politically astute, And you have to understand you're fighting for the dignity and the pride of the next door. If we're all lemelach and we cave in and we do whatever they tell us to do, so our children will grow up believing that we're not confident. So in order to instill your children with confidence, you have to be proud, and sometimes that entails doubling down. If they'll give us a voice and we could debate them and we have an open arena, and then we don't have to double down. Then we can have our voice heard and we'll make a clearer, better argument than they will. But they won't give us the voice. The voices are dominated by those who hate religion. So therefore, the only response that religious people can do often is to double down. When I explain this to secular students, I tell them,
wait.
Yes,
So wait, Rabbi, so does doubling down mean lying down in the street so that people can't go to work because you're upset about the army draft?
Okay,
Does doubling down mean marching in front of the UN, burning Israeli flags? Does doubling down mean getting up by rallies and intimating that the mayor of New York is a Nazi and he wants to perpetuate the killing of Jews that Nazis did, and that's why they're doing vaccines?
I hear you. So my response is like this:
will your kids remain prouder and more frum because of if you did any one of those three positions?
Good. Okay. So my answer to that is of course not. Doubling down does not mean that. But any position you take is going to have a risk factor in that people who are unhealthy and not normal and extreme will get carried away. So sometimes when we're apologizing and we're doing the apologizing, giving in mode, you'll have Torah type groups that don't know when to stop giving up, and they'll give up everything. And other modern Orthodox Jews would say that they're extremists and they're giving up too much. But to be, to dress in a certain way that fits in the world and to talk in a certain way, that's acceptable. The same way on the right, we have the same problem, that when you're doubling down, there will be extreme double downers who will do crazy things. That doesn't necessarily mean we shouldn't be advocating doubling down, because some people get carried away. The same way that modern Orthodox Jews would say we should be fitting in with the world in a larger way, even though some people get carried away with that. We can't always explain away Meshugayim. There's Meshugayim and there's dangerous people. We can minimize it and we can make known that we draw lines. But doubling down means I grew up as a yeshiva bacher. We were fiery. We used to sing all the kanoyistic songs. It was part of my chinuch. I'll even go further. By the way, this is maybe this is the same point, or maybe it's an additional point. But I have two sons in yeshiva, and I happen to be like Rabbi Leibstein, and I understood the Rav Shach wanted Rabbi Leibstein to be the manik. That was my mahalach. A lot of people today where I live, and a lot of my kahila is very, very more right-wing, and they're going to hafganot and stuff. So my son's in yeshiva, and he wanted to go. So I thought about it a lot, and you know what? I bit my tongue. I drove him to the asifa to hear the speeches, and I sat outside in the car because I felt that a yeshiva bacher needs the experience of being fired up. It was part of my chinuch, and it should be part of his chinuch. And you see, if we want our kids to be fired up, you can't turn off and on fire, especially when you're in high school. They're not so nuanced. A kid is passionate, so let him get up and make his voice heard.
Can I just say, the Satmar Rebbe, right, held that the way to keep Satmar religious is they need an enemy. Right? So the Zionist state was a very fortunate enemy to keep the community together. So my question is if you need sort of false passions to stay religious, is that like like I have to burn an Israeli flag because without an enemy my community doesn't stay together? I mean, is that what I don't know,
Listen, I would take issue with the way King phrased the question. I don't think he had to find an enemy. I think that the enemy he found is real. You don't need to create wars. The point is that you can't let somebody be all in his life and tell him you have to be all in and then run away from existing wars. Those wars exist. You don't people are trying to silence us. By the way, this isn't just Yiddishkeit. This phenomenon exists throughout America.
But you're saying people are trying to silence us. In other words, Rav Steinman right? Well, let me say, Rebbe Steinman, who was, let's say, anti-Pellis, right, and he felt it, or Rebbe Yehuda, etc. They're not religious, and their passion is not enough to keep our kids inspired. We have to go beyond them because Rav Steinman was too modern.
Well, listen, it's a holy argument. I guess the argument would be, you see, traditionally we did stand up, and I grew up reading Rebbe Chanan in Ikvis Mashiach. I grew up hearing about the Evsektia and the secular Zionists, and I lived it. I saw it. And I see, by the way, I see it today in academia and the secular world. The left trying to silence anyone who has values, ethics. Families are evil. There's no truth. There's no morality. There's no everything. Everything is evil. Boy Scouts are evil. Shouldn't people be fighting back? Now, the argument would be, I think, again, who am I to say what Rabbi Leib is thinking? But I would, if I had to explain it, because he was my manig, and he held something different than I grew up with. Rav Shach definitely was more fiery. I would say that there reaches a point where the Frum Kehillah becomes successful enough and strong enough that we can be more gracious. We don't have to be so defensive. The reason why I believe this might be the reason is because I've seen it also, like in Lakewood. Rav Aaron came and he built up yeshivas, and groups like Chabad would argue and say, how come you're not doing Kirov? And the answer is, Rav Aaron wasn't asking, he was fighting for Klal Yisrael, but there's a priority to build Torah. Once Torah was built and Lakewood is thriving, now we can slowly start to dabble and go into Kirov. And Lakewood's all into Kirov. I'm a Lakewood guy, I'm in Kirov, so many guys in Kirov. Because when you reach a certain level of safety and strength, then you can do it. And that's probably what Rabbi Leib felt, is that we're not suffering anymore. We've reached critical mass. We're thriving. Today, it used to be, if somebody went to yeshiva and didn't go to college, he had to hang his head in shame, and the parents would say, we don't have enough money to send him. He didn't have the zitzfleisch for college. We couldn't afford it. Today, it's the opposite. Today, if you go to medical school, you have to say he didn't have the zitzfleisch for yeshiva. We couldn't afford to sit. He couldn't afford to sit in kollel. We've gotten to a great place. So maybe we could be gracious.
So let me go through the list of these things, and you tell me, vote on them. Leif Tahor, passionate, precious. They're the ones who do the burkas, etc. Or you agree or not?
Listen, again, specifically Leif Tahor, I think the guy was a Meshugana. He wasn't born from. He wasn't the product of Yeshivas. But people like that. How different is Tush from Leif Tahor? I think Tush is Kol Kulei Kadosh. I think that we have people. If people want to double down on Sneas, as non-Jewish as I think that is, let them do it. It's a scary world.
Do you think burkas are acceptable? Because let them do it.
Again, I'm not going to throw someone out of Klal Yisrael and get up and I understand where they're coming from. If they're going to force, I'm not into it. If someone's going to laugh at us for tznius and somebody wants to respond by digging in deeper. That's not my enemy. It's sad. And it's sad. Well, let me finish the thought. It's sad, but I get where it's coming from. It's not on my top 10 list of things I should be fighting.
The Torah Karta.
Again, same thing. Most of the people there are crazy mishagoyim, but it's a curve, and there are people on every spot in the spectrum to the right of me and to the left of me. And people who, I grew up in the Yekish Kahila. They were very anti-Zionist. We love Eretz Yisrael. Everything's Eretz Yisrael. But to deny that there's a huge force in Eretz Yisrael that wants to silence the Frum Kahila.
So you think marching in front of the UN and with swastikas on Israeli flags is fine?
I don't think our audience is goyim ever. I don't think we do anything for goyim. I think our audience is for other Jews. I grew up, Rav Kushner in 9th grade in Long Beach. He talked about these things, and we heard it, and we sang songs.
Okay, let's continue.
Well, let me say one last thing. This will be interesting for you. This is going to sound a little extreme. When I was a Rav out of town, you know what I did? You know my balabatim became from? I would like to say it was my deep shiurim and my beautiful Shabbos table and my cholent, maybe a little bit the cholent. But I subscribed my balabatim to Yated. the first time they walked in the door. I was selling Yated, buy Yated. And in those days, they would come in. They would read that the government is trying to shut down the newest Chinuch Atzmai school and the schools. And then in this town, they're opening schools, and their entry into Judaism was the feeling that people are trying to silence Torah, and they weren't from themselves, but they felt that, and they became Charedim well before they kept Shabbos. As weird as it sounds, there were people in my shul who they lived far away and they weren't holding by it yet, but they owned Borsalinos because they wanted to be B'nai Torah, even though they were tiptoeing in Shmir. Now that might sound obscene, and I definitely didn't encourage it. But again, I didn't put a damper on it because people are hashkafically. The first thing you feel is the passion for something and the resentment. This is, Trump got elected from this. Now it's the same thing. Is Trump the most from role model? No, but I'll defend Trump because I understand he's a response to the left that wants to silence him. So the same way.
So Leif Tahor, Notori Karat, the Peleg, you said you're okay with. What about, let's say, the anti-vaxxers?
Again, I don't know if I'm okay with them blocking. You told me that they're blocking traffic. I don't know. I'm not okay with them blocking traffic. I'm okay with Frum Yidden saying that and chanting.
What about
and singing
anti-vaxxers? Same thing.
Again, I don't get it at all, the anti-vaxxers. But if it's, the one thing I'll say for anti-vaxxers, and this is my curiosity, I'm staunchly anti-vaxxer, but I'm critical of even my own positions, and I'm wondering this, do we know for a fact that the science is really like this? If you found out tomorrow that they were lying to you, I believe they're telling the truth. I believe it. But global warming.
99.9% of doctors in the world believe in it.
I get it. I just want to throw in something.
They're poisoning their own children?
No, Dave, I'm with you. I wouldn't let into my school an anti-vaxxer. I just want to say something to defend people like this. Here's my defense in one sentence, is that the scientists have told us that you're born homosexual, that life doesn't begin till who knows when, that the world is melting, global warming. Okay. We know that that's not true.
Well,
so once the scientists...
You don't think there's global warming?
I don't think that there's the degree of man-made global warming.
You think it's a coincidence that the years that there's been by far the most heat emissions into the atmosphere, we have the warmest winters on record in the last 100 years?
I think that you're seeing...
Think it's a coincidence, just like the Nikra?
I think you're seeing a lot of doctored information.
And who's lying exactly? There was the energy companies certainly aren't motivated to lie. So what's the motivation of scientists to be making up these lies?
Okay, good. So that's the point. Because I believe there is global warming. I'm not sure how much of it is man-made, and I don't think anything we can do that we know anything.
So my question is, do you think millions of doctors want to kill us, and they want to kill their own kids too, which is why they vaccinate?
Nobody wants to kill it. Nobody wants to kill anybody. What they want to do is, and this is why do they need homosexuals to be born like that? Let's not talk about homosexuals. Let's talk about vaccines. Are all the doctors trying to kill their own children? That's my question. Again, I told you, I'm anti-vaxxers. Very anti-vaxxers. I'm explaining to you that there's a skepticism about scientists today, because scientists.
So when somebody gets sick that do you send them to a doctor or do you send them to a voodoo because you're skeptical about science?
Yeah, well, again, a doctor's not a scientist. I live on academia, and I'm telling you.
When you have somebody sick, do you send them to the hospital where there's all the voodoo people are, or do you send them to?
I send them to a doctor, but if someone
when your kids get sick, do you put them on antibiotics or not?
Again, but if somebody has a choili hanefesh, I'm not sending him to any sociologist, any philosopher, any theologist, any.
Well, do you send them to a therapist?
Because they're all liars. Again, a lot of therapists are listen, I have Aish Hatorah used to send, all the guys used to go to something called Landmark. Landmark is this unbelievable thing. I read what Landmark was and I stopped the whole thing. I tried to stop the whole thing. Landmark is classic Amalek philosophy. Move on and get on with your life. But I'll tell you, because their philosophy is...
So you think getting a vaccine is the equivalent of going to a philosophy class?
No, I told you, vaccines, I don't like the vaccine, Marshall, because I'm anti.
Well, that's what we're talking about.
Medicine is different than the hard sciences are different than the soft sciences. There's a lot more to play with. Sociologists are far more dangerous than practical scientists. Once something gets real and measurable, it's different. I'm explaining, though, that there's a skepticism when someone throws the word science out there. How many times can you throw out the word science for a lie and then not be the boy who cried wolf? Science, the frum world is being hit over the head with pseudoscience for a long time. So if people get carried away with their skepticism, I understand it. I would work to convince them. I would not accept their kid into my school, but I wouldn't call them sickos. I would sit down and I would say, Zieskite, I understand why you've been burnt by these people. And yes, they want to silence your amunas and your beliefs. And they hate that you're so happy. But in this case, this is the doctors. They don't want to kill your kids. Maybe they're wrong, but this is the best we know, and you are achroi and mechoyev to do the best you can. And this is the best you can. We don't think it's a lie over here. I think that that's the shmooze, not to paint them as evil, because I understand where they're coming from. You know how many fights I've had with scientists about ideas that are patently lies, you know? Baruch Hashem, I don't back down and I can win those fights, but most people have lost so many times. The same way the typical Jewish kid on college is not even pro-Israel anymore because he's been shamed and beaten up and he doesn't know how to answer. So this is the world we live in. Shouldn't a dignified person fight back somewhere? And if he does, do you be mean to him or do you encourage him? You wipe off his tears and you say there are other ways to protest than risking your kid's measles at best, and a worse diseases possibly. That's my position.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time as always, okay?
For everything.
Thank you. Bye-bye. We have on the phone with us from New York, Rebbe Shmuel Yaakov Klein. He's Director of Publications for Torah and Umesorah. He's the head of Zecharia Ma'aseilam. He's the Hamodia columnist. He's a Talmud of Rabbi Yankiv Weinberg, Zecharia Levracha, and Rabbi Dave Schwartzman, Zecharia Levracha. Welcome, Rabbi Klein.
Thank you.
So, Rabbi Klein, extremism and sort of living at the fringe, and clearly that's a subject of debate. I don't think anybody thinks they're an extremist, but I think what the majority of society would consider extremist, be they the Torah Charta, be they the anti-vaxxers, and clearly a difference between the two. Everyone has their own. The Talmidim of Peleg who lie down in the streets, the Burqa ladies, and each one has its own iterations. Mm-hmm. What does it do to the families? How, first of all, what does it do, and then what's the psychology? And answer where you feel you're qualified, or maybe talk to us as a mechanach, a parent who says, "Listen, I want to join a Leif Tahor or one of these, Peleg." What does extreme thinking do to family life and ultimately to the Chanech Lenar Pidarke, where this child will end up?
That's a very broad question. That's the first thing I would say.
As a mechanech, I ask you, when you take an extreme position, and an extreme position means that you're an outlier to the Kahal Adas Yisrael, whatever your Adas may be. So, does it foster other behavior? It's interesting. Well, I've been working on this topic now for the last week or so, and I see that many of the Netorei Karta are also Peleg, are also the extreme anti-women. So it's there's a certain almost like those who believe in conspiracies and extremes often have more than one area of extremism. Would you?
Exactly. Yes. Right.
Would you agree with that?
Yes. There's 4 areas in our Yiddishkeit that have to be focused on, and all of those 4 are legitimate, not to the same degree, are important, not to the same degree, and anything which goes beyond those 4, in my view, could be labeled as extremist. And the 4 are certainly, number 1 would be halacha, the second would be minhag, and one of the great problems in chinuch today is that in some moises and some spheres, the division, the demarcation between halacha and between minhag is blurred, so the kids sometimes have the distorted view of what halacha is, thinking that minhag is halacha. At the same time, minhag itself, minhag Yisrael Torah, as we know, that's important, but it has to be understood as minhag. And the third thing is das Torah. Das Torah, on issues which may not have been discussed in halacha, may not have fallen under the genre of minhag per se, but have to be decided on by current das Torah. And I guess a consensus of Gedolei Yisrael would be required, and that's generally the pattern that's followed by, let's say, organizations such as Torah Umesorah, organizations such as Agudas Yisrael. You have a Mayetzes, you have a Bad Rosh Yeshivas, etc. And the fourth area would be Umesorah. And Umesorah is also important, perhaps not quite as important as the other three. Umesorah varies. Some areas don't have a Umesorah, such as really, I would say, the subject of our previous discussion a few months ago, and that is Chinuch Habonos, does not really have a classical Umesorah, because it only began about a century ago, as you know. Those are four areas, and extremism has to be avoided well, in halacha, there's also thing as extremism. If the halacha is X, then that's what the halacha is. In minhag, if the minhag Yisrael is to do X, so, professing or suggesting that hanhaga to Talmidim is not extreme. So if a person lives in a community and he's of kids where the majority of the kids are, let's say, from Hasidic backgrounds, and the official school shita is, let's say, Yakish or Litvish, if a Rebbe were to say that the minhag of most of the Talmidim should be observed, and that is not to eat gebrochts on Pesach, that's not extreme, because that's a minhag Yisrael Torah. Again, that's an example. Das Torah, again, let's go back to Chinuch Habonos for a moment. If the question of skirt lengths and stocking, socks, all of these issues having to do with tznius, so there is conventional wisdom, which is decided by consensus das Torah of Gedolei Yisrael. And to suggest, if you're living in a city where perhaps the average or the norm does not observe that das Torah, I don't think it's extremist to profess that shita or that das Torah, to try to convince Talmidos to go according to that. The conventional wisdom in that kehillah may not jive with that. Fine, but there is such a thing as das Torah. Das Torah is a prime component of what we believe, and it's a cornerstone since the Kabbalah Torah. I'm not going to get into the proofs for that, unless you really want me to, but that's borne out. And the third thing is Umesorah. Also, it's important. Somebody asked a couple of years ago a question about whether a boy, a Yekish at home, is living in a Litvish yeshiva, and the boy became bar mitzvah, and the minhag among the Yekish boys is to wear talis by davening, and the school does not have that particular hanhaga, so the question was whether the boy should be encouraged. So I was one of those who answered. I think this is one of the questions that came up in the Chinuch Roundtable in the Ated, and I think most people encouraged the boy it suggested the boy should be encouraged, absolutely, to follow the Umesorah. There's beauty in the Umesorah. It adds to a person's identity. So whereas some people might say that to push that kind of a hanhaga on a boy and that kind of a surrounding might be extremist, I would take issue with that. Now, we're talking about things which, like you said earlier, are on the fringe, leif tahor, they are devastating. I have a close friend who has a son who became part of that cult, and I do use that word determinedly. It was devastating. It continues to be. But those, I think, are rarities. Certainly for the North American community, I don't think we have a great propensity to that kind of extremism. The population of Leif Tahor, B'chol HaNilvim Eilehem, it's not very great. I don't know how much Peleg is a popular concern here in North America. So if we're talking about Eretz Yisrael Chinuch, it might be a different equation, bottom line. But here, I don't think extremism is really a major factor. Unless, again, somebody defines extremism as really pushing complete adherence to those four categories: halacha, minhag, das Torah, and Umesorah.
Okay. So overall, do you think extremism is, good, bad, or indifferent for a family or the society that adopts it?
So if it's firmly established what extremism is, and there's less mandapalig, that we're talking about something which is indeed extremist, I would say that it's terrible, not only bad. It can break a family apart. It can mislead kids. It can get kids really to go off the derech. And it has to be,
Have you ever, as a mechanech, have you ever experienced something like that?
Yes, but I'm not going to go into detail for fear of identifying or fear of the case being identified or referred to. But absolutely, more than once.
Can you give us like a general idea, like because of this? So, like, give us an example.
Well, just in broader terms, I can say that where the hadracha that a child was given by those who are responsible for his chinuch was overly repressive, then the result on occasion has been disastrous, or that person ended up being what is commonly referred to as OTD. It's not a secret that this is one of the causes. There are many causes for out the derech behavior, but that's one of them. A repressive kind of a regime.
Why do people become extremists?
I think I'm hoping, and to their credit, that it's grounded in a firm belief in a particular policy or Haskafa that they're subscribing to. If they're being something, if they're not believing in that which they're extreme about, then they are charlatans, and they are shakronim. They are the evil, sinister people.
Let's assume they do believe. Why do people grasp onto sincere belief, extreme beliefs?
I think in the zeal that we all should have at some point to serve the Rabbi Shalom in the best possible way, so a person may be deluded into thinking that such an opinion is the best possible way for him. Again, I'm not going to go into issues which may reflect, not in a positive way, in a negative way on a certain kehillah or certain kehillos. I'm reluctant to do that. But there's certain shittas which some people believe firmly is their best way of serving the Rebbeinu Shalom. I think most Yidden in the Orthodox Machane are sholel. They negate that. They reject that kind of a position. Those who follow the position, I think, believe that they're doing HaKadosh Baruch Hu's bidding by doing so.
But it's extreme. Why do some people feel that the extreme way is the way to follow the Rebbeinu Shalom's bidding?
Well, to use a crass example, if a person loves chocolate, then he wants chocolate almost at all times or whenever he can get his hands on it. This is something which they love. This is something which they believe in. It's something which speaks to them. So they go, pardon the expression, whole hog. That's what they want to do. That's their belief. So
you're saying do the extremists love the Rebbeinu Shalom more than non-extremists?
No. But
so why do some
they
people
love
choose?
the derech that they've chosen to serve him.
So what psychology directs one person to follow a rational, thoughtful, agreed upon, whereas another person says, totally outlier opinion, let's go burn Israeli flags, whatever it may be. Why? And L'Shem Shemayim, what is the mentality that brings to extremism?
I'm not a psychologist, that's number one. Number two, the issue of radicalization of people is an issue which I think even the greatest minds are contending with, and not terribly successfully either. People are radicalized by various things, whether it's blogs or whether it's internet and all sorts of things. People tend to be radicalized. I think one of the things that may be coming into play is one of the things, not the only thing, but sometimes you have a scenario where a person feels a little bit vacant. He feels that he's not fulfilled. He feels that there's something really missing in his life, and this somehow sparks a romantic glamour for him, and he'll pursue it to the extent that he possibly can. And that equals extremism. That's a pretty common scenario, I think.
Rabbi Klein, what do you feel people who, let's say, would go to an anti-vaxxer rally, which generates a massive amount of from press, should they be concerned with the issue of Chilul Hashem?
My gut feeling says yes. I don't think any Gadol B'Yisrael advises people to go to rallies. Certainly the idea of putting this into the public eye as a possible goyim of anti-Semitism, which is already on the rise even without this issue, I don't think it's something that any Gadol B'Yisrael would advise us to do. So rallies are a different shaila. That's not our way of doing things generally.
Well, Rabbi Klein, thank you very much. It's always an honor to have you on with us.
Thank you so much. Hatzloch and kol tov. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.